My father died about 5 years ago, unexpectedly, from a heart attack. To say it was difficult on my mother and I was an understatement. Our old house in Knoxville just didn't feel like home anymore. About a year later, Mom and I made plans to take ourselves and our elderly dog, Ace, on a move further south to a small town situated about half an hour from ATL. Just a few days before we were supposed to move, I had one of the most vivid dreams I ever come to experience. All that was within my dream was my bedroom, a picture perfect of the real thing. I sometimes wonder if it was in some sort of sleep paralysis state when it occurred. To further add to the dream's realism, in the middle of the night, the street lights right across the street would illuminate through my window, creating a light reflection on the wall perpendicular. In my dream, as I lay there staring at the exact reflection on the wall, I saw an orb of smoke fading from the shadows. Goosebumps chilled across my skin as I lay there panicked and afraid to move a muscle. Suddenly, it stopped moving and hung in the light's reflection, as if it was staring at me. Without warning, it spoke to me. In my dead father's voice, I'm sending something to watch you. Despite hearing my father's voice come from the orb, I became terrified. I'm not sure why, and yet I managed to let out a small reply towards it. "What?" I whisper. The orb stayed silent for a few moments, leaving an eerie dead silence in the voice's place. Just as quickly, it spoke to me one final time. "Down, Black." I woke up almost instantly, gasping for breath. The nightmare had chilled me to my core. I'm not sure exactly what to make of it, especially those two final words. I chalked it up to maybe Dad wishing us well on our move, but at the time, I couldn't shake the feeling it was some kind of warning. Within the next couple of weeks, my mother and I moved out of Knoxville and headed south to Georgia. She had managed to find a little house for us, with only one or two neighbors down a gravel road in the middle of the woods. It was a nice fit for us. The best reliever of all the stress that came with the move was our new neighbor's cat. She was a petite, older black cat that gravitated towards me almost instantly, and I treated her as if she was my own pet. I left out a can of food once or twice a week for her, and even if I didn't call out for her, when she saw me outside, she would always run up to me. She actually helped me ease my tensions about leaving Knoxville behind, especially without Dad there with us. Less than a month into our new home, I woke up suddenly to a faint coughing noise that sounded like it was coming from downstairs. One thing to know about our dog Ace, he has a condition in his trachea. He needs medicine to help calm the condition down, so I'm used to waking up in the middle of the night to give him his medicine. I proceeded downstairs from my bedroom to give him his cough medicine, but I couldn't find him anywhere throughout the house. He wasn't in his bed sleeping. He wasn't in the kitchen. He was nowhere to be found. I didn't check my mom's bedroom because I didn't want to wake her up. Besides, I wouldn't have heard the coughing if he was in there anyways, so I just let it be. That's when I heard the cough again, but it was coming from further away, as if it was from outside. I looked over at the side patio door leading out into the woods, and realized I had forgot to close it. There it stood, slightly open. Shit, I thought to myself, he got out. I immediately ran outside with a flashlight and started calling out for my dog. "Ace! Ace!" I shouted into the trees. I heard another cough and shined my light in its direction. This time it had echoed from down the gravel road. I thought my dog was lost, and I chalked it up to new house jitters. So I said, "Ace, come on boy, home's this way, buddy." That's when I heard it. The cough that I had been following, almost right beside me. But this time, it didn't stay like the dry cough I had been hearing. Instead, the cough had slowly descended into a low growl. I shined my light towards the new sound, and there stood a bright red fox in the middle of the path. I figured it was some kind of sick fox I had mistaken for my dog. The whole time, as I was processing what I was seeing, it stared directly at me. Its eyes glowed from the light of my flashlight. However, our stare broke when it tilted its head to the right. I looked down, and there she was, our neighbor's little black cat standing beside me. However, it was as if she had completely changed who she was. She was no longer the happy, affectionate cat that I had come to know. Instead, she had her back arched upright, every fiber of hair standing at attention, and she let out the lowest growl I had ever heard. In that moment, I figured she was just scared of the fox, so I knelt down beside her in a bid to move her away and avoid the fox hurting her. But no matter how many times I tried to move her out of fight mode, she wouldn't budge. Her stare remained unfazed. That's when I looked towards the direction of the fox once more. But there wasn't a fox standing there anymore. Instead, in the exact same spot of that gravel road, was a walking, rotting corpse of a roadkill coyote, slowly moving towards me. I took a step back, absolutely horrified of what I was seeing. Its jaw was hanging loose from its face. One of its eyes was stained with blood, and it wobbled back and forth as if it was desperately fighting pain. I rubbed my eyes out of disbelief, hoping I was imagining it, hoping I was dreaming it, but it was still there when my eyes reopened. Despite the sight before us, our neighbor's black cat, no matter how tiny she was, stood there and kept growling at the creature. Suddenly, it stopped. The creature had ceased its walk towards us. For a moment, it just stood there, glancing back and forth between myself and this little black cat that was trying to defend me. That's when I heard this creature say two words in a low voice: "Down, Black." In a flash, the creature ran straight into the woods. I shined my flashlight in its direction, but it had completely vanished. Even the brush it had ran through looked untouched. That's when the cat, still standing beside me, calmed herself down, almost as if nothing had happened. She rubbed herself up against my leg, returning to her normal, loving mood. Despite technically not being mine, I proceeded to scoop her up and run back into the house. Before heading upstairs with the little black cat snuggled up in my arms, I decided to poke my head into my mother's room. Laying on the floor, sound asleep, was Ace. He had been there the entire time. I quietly closed her door before going upstairs. I made sure that the little cat slept with me in my bed that night. From the research I'd done, I think I was almost a victim of some kind of skinwalker. It must have picked up the sounds my dog sometimes makes late at night, knowing that I would likely come to his aid. And for whatever reason, our neighbor's black cat had scared it so badly, it scrambled away. I haven't seen it since that night. Maybe because that cat still likes to wander down the gravel road late at night. Or maybe that thing just decided I wasn't worth the trouble. Either way, whether I have my father or pure luck to thank, I leave a can of food out every single night for that little black cat. And you know the most ironic part of everything? That cat's name is Halloween. I'm a bird hunter who lives in Oregon. I have a Flushing dog I train to hunt. His name is Reggie, who I take out most weekends of the hunting season to look for quail or whatever else there is. For the last 3 years, the only meat I have ate from mid-September through the end of January has been the birds my dog and I hunt. Also the elk or deer that I usually bag during the season. It's actually something I've become pretty passionate about. 2 weekends ago was the end of quail, so I planned a day trip out to East Oregon. For those who don't know, most of Oregon is essentially a desert. The area between the Cascade Mountains and the Pacific is rainy and forested. However, with the exception of a few small mountain ranges, 2/3 of the state east of the Cascades is just red rocks, brush, and country for hundreds of miles, all the way to the Idaho border. Even though it's quite cold this time of the year, it's still amazingly beautiful, with literally millions of acres of public land. I loaded Reggie and my gear into the truck early Saturday morning, several hours before sunrise, and set off. Just at first light, we got to a big, open river valley. I have spent lots of time exploring, but this certain area was new to me. It was about 30 degrees. Looked like a light dusting of snow the night before, but otherwise pretty dry, and would be a fairly clear day. I love these moments, maybe more than anything in life. Being the only human in a massive wild landscape without a single trail or building for miles, the isolation, the giddiness of the upcoming adventure, the feeling of exploring an area that looked the same 500 years ago, the feeling of going out to get my own food, the contrast between hot coffee in my thermos and the cold winter wind on my exposed hands. All of it, just my favorite place to be. I got the dog ready and put on my boots and pack, loaded a shotgun, and we set off along the top of the valley ridge, 600 to 700 yards above the river, looking over the cold landscape. For those who never seen it, watching a hunting dog work is a truly fascinating spectacle to behold. It's honestly why I enjoy upland bird hunting so much. To me, watching a really good hunting dog actively hunt for wild game birds is honestly not that much different from watching a trained dolphin or sea lion at SeaWorld or something like that. A work dog doing its job can be so focused and intelligent. It's shocking sometimes. I trained Reggie well, but so much of it is just primal. It's Reggie's 6th hunting season, so we spend hundreds of days off trail, exploring the backcountry, and we have really learned to read each other well. Coastal rainforest, high desert, alpine mountains, hardwood forest, farmland, swamps, marshes. We have adventured through it all together. If there's a game bird near, Reggie sells it. I can tell by the way that he moves his tail, the frequency of sniffing, and the lateral angles of his turns. I can tell if he smells another person from how he looks back at me. I can tell if he smells a coyote, wolf, bear, or mountain lion from how he drops his spine. I can tell if he smells an elk, deer, or moose from how he tilts his head to catch the wind. He's my best friend, and we're actually a real, solid team. About an hour after we started hiking along the valley ridge, we came to a gully that cut downhill through the ridge towards the river, which we would have to cross. I picked the way down the steep rise to the other dry, boulder-filled creek bed at the bottom of the gully, where a deer trail led back up to the other side. Halfway down the slope, Reggie started acting real strange. He stopped about 30 feet in front of me, cocked his head to the side, and fixed his gaze down to our left, towards the spot in the dry creek bed as it dropped down the valley. He then leaned his head, as if trying to get a better view, and then started turning around towards me without pulling his eyes off the spot, which he really only does when he's actually scared of something, like when we go to the vet, or I start up a chainsaw. Then he bolted up the steep side of the gully to where I was standing. "What is it, bud?" He kept switching his gaze from my eyes to the same spot below us, while pacing around in half circles. Strange. My first thought was mountain lion, which I always have at the back of my mind. They're all over the place out here, but they clear out long before they let people, let alone a person with a dog, get this close to them. We got across this gully and keep moving, so I patted the dog on the head and kept on moving down towards the bottom of the gully. Reggie stayed right on my heels the entire time. The bottom of the gully was a dry creek bed loaded with car-sized boulders, with a lot of rocks and gravel running between the rock formations and steep, grassy walls of the gully. As I was crunching over the gravel, Reggie stopped in the middle of the creek bed and once again was fixed on something to our left, down the gully. This time he dropped his spine and I could see his hackles raise. Oh shit, I thought. Maybe there is some kind of animal in the rocks down there. I flipped the safety off my shotgun and started talking to Reggie in the quote-unquote cute buddy tone I use when I'm trying to calm him down. I started walking towards a big boulder in the middle of the creek bed that was blocking my view. Looked like once I was past it, I would have a clear field of view over the entire gully, all the way down to the valley side of the river. Reggie was still frozen in place. I patted his head as I passed on his right side. Once I got a few paces past him, I noticed he wasn't following me, which he always did, even if it was a bear ahead of us. I looked back at him. "Let's go, bud. Let's go get it." He started pacing around in half circles again, with his ears back and his tail down. What the fuck, I thought. Definitely never seen him do this before. Unless again, we're like at the vet. I seen him chase 400-pound black bears off my property and squabble with countless coyotes. He's not scared of much. This got me pretty anxious. I shouldered my shotgun and decided that before we keep moving, at this point, checking behind the boulder where something had the dog all tweaked out was a safe thing to do. So I moved quickly. In my experience dealing with black bears and mountain lions, 99.9% of the times you bump into one, they're terrified and run away as fast as they possibly can, especially when surprised by something with confident movement that's making lots of noises. But definitely don't do this with a grizzly bear. I heard Reggie start following me as I started to move around the boulder. I came around the big rock on the right side, and in front of me was a big clearing in the creek bed and a huge, big horned sheep, a ram, no more than 25 feet in front of me. We run into big horned sheep out in this country all the time, so it wasn't that much of a surprise. What was surprising was how this thing was sitting. That's the only way I can think to describe it. It was sitting on its folded back legs, like a dog or cat would, holding itself up with a straight back posture, with its front legs locked in the gravel, staring straight ahead, so I couldn't see its face. These are very skittish animals. They would never let a person get this close. A bunch of things went through my mind at the same time. Maybe it's dead. No, it was cold, and I could see steam coming from its slow breathing. Maybe it's wounded and dying. Maybe it's stuck on some old fencing or something. Right then, Reggie started barking. Not just barking, but like snarl barking, like he was in a fight. He's a pretty quiet dog generally, and he never barks at deer, elk, or rams. Maybe prances after them for a few seconds. That's if we bump into one when we're hiking and we spook it. But he's never been very interested in big mammals. It actually startled me. I looked back at him, and he had his front legs splayed out. His head was down, his tail was down. His hackles were raised up so high that he didn't even look like Reggie no more. And he was fully showing his teeth and barking and snarling like I never seen. He looked feral, like a coyote. I could hear the snap of his teeth as he barked again and again. I looked back at the ram, still, just sitting there, unmoving, staring straight ahead. Now that was fucking strange. I never known a wild mammal to do anything but run away, terrified at the presence of a canine, let alone not even move a muscle with a canine being aggressive. I was pretty convinced at that point that the ram had to be real sick or super fucked up in some way. Definitely close to death, even if it was tangled up on something. Or maybe he had got trapped in a leg snare. It would be freaking the hell out with a dog going crazy next to it, the way Reggie was. "Reggie, here!" I yelled to him. Here is sort of my catch-all command for him, meaning, stop what you're doing and get to my heels right fucking now. Reggie didn't even look at me. I took my shotgun in my left hand, turned and took a step towards the dog and pointed at the ground in front of me, and pretty much screamed, "Reggie, here!" Again, nothing. He just kept barking and snarling at the ram. That really put me on edge. He had never just completely ignored a firm command before. It's like I wasn't even there. I turned back to the ram and shouldered my shotgun again. Something was wrong. Real fucking wrong. All my years spent in the backcountry, hunting and tracking big game animals. I mean, I literally have guided ram hunts professionally, just one valley over, and I had never seen anything like this. The wind was picking up down the gully. I felt its bite on my hands. The light dusting of snow from the night before was getting whipped up around the gully. I started moving around the ram to its right, trying to gain some elevation to stay somewhat above it. As I rounded its position to get a look at its face. Bighorn sheep don't attack people. They're skittish as hell, so I wasn't scared of that. But this thing seemed unwell, so I figured all bets were off. As I was sidestepping around it, the wind in the gully started messing with the pressure in my ears. I felt like I was landing while inside an airplane, and my eyes popping slightly dulled the volume of Reggie snarling and barking, and the wind howling down around the rocks. My heart was pounding pretty good at this point. I got to a spot about 8 feet directly to its right, and about 3 to 4 feet above it, up the slope of the gully, and could start to make out its face. My heart rate was going insane, uniquely so, to the point I actually noticed the pressure change made it so I could hear my heartbeat thundering in my ears and feeling it in my cheeks and eyes. It felt like I had taken a few Red Bulls, then sprinted a mile. Trying to calm myself down and get a grip only made me more jumpy and anxious. I took another step and could see its mouth. It was slightly open, with milky snot running from its nose and saliva dripping from its bottom lip, with little spurts and flecks shooting out every time it exhaled a steamy breath. What the fuck? I kept saying out loud. I took another step and could start to see its eyes behind the big, full curls of its horns, which were pocked with scars and abrasions from a lifetime of fighting other rams and existing in this hard, rocky country. I took another step so I was able to essentially look at it from the front for the first time and see its full features. It had tears pouring out of its eyes, and it sounded almost like it was moaning. Alright, I thought, this thing is incredibly fucked up. Is it a virus or something? Is its lower spine broken? I wanted to put it out of its misery, but shooting a bighorn sheep without a license is a felony with a $15,000 fine. So I started thinking about hiking back and calling the fish and game officers. I lowered my shotgun and was about to turn to go back towards the dog when it snapped its head up to the right and looked right at me. Until my last day alive, I will never forget that moment. All the wind was knocked out of me, or sucked out of me. It felt like I was free falling with my stomach in my throat. I couldn't move. I pissed myself, just straight up urinated in my pants for the first time since I was a baby. Tears started rolling out of my eyes down my cheeks. My hands and feet went numb. I didn't notice the dog move, but Reggie was suddenly right at my feet, with a strap from my backpack in its mouth, pulling on it as hard as he could, as though we were playing tug of war, yanking me back the way I had come. But I couldn't move. I couldn't raise my shotgun. Couldn't look away from the ram. I was stuck. Then, the ram started weeping. That's the only way I can describe it. Fucking weeping. It didn't move its body, only its head. But it was whimpering and weeping like a fucking person. Its facial features became very human. Its eyes bulged. Its bottom lip was quivering. It was whimpering out noises like it was trying to speak between sobs, while sucking in air like a crying child would. Then, unmistakably, it started speaking, or more like it started pleading. Don't go. Don't go. Don't go. It was increasing gradually, from a whimpering pleading to a desperate screaming. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was gonna throw up, or had already thrown up. After what felt like about 15 seconds, my dog finally yanked on my pack hard enough to get me to stumble, and I lost my footing. I couldn't move my leg to replace my foot, so I went down to one knee, then buckled ahead down the slope, rolling onto a shoulder, and finally breaking my eye contact with the ram. The second I broke eye contact with that thing, I could breathe again, and the sensation of falling went away. Reggie was whining and barking now, right in my face, licking my cheek, yanking me away from where I had fallen. I pushed myself on my palms and just screamed, "Go!" to the dog and grabbed my shotgun and half sprinted, half crawled up the hill out of the gully as fast as I could. The screams of the ram were getting louder. It started to hurt my ears. Reggie was ahead of me, stopping every 20 feet or so to look at me and bark towards the noise. I could see the dog was shaking like a leaf. The screaming started to turn into a single, unbroken roar that sounded half beast and half wind. The pressure in my head was so bad that a throbbing reddish blackness flooded my vision, and I could barely see. I just kept crawling and scrambling towards my dog's barking, and eventually crossed the crest of the slope at the top of the gully and was on flat ground again atop the valley ridge. Right then, the roaring stopped, the wind died down, and I felt the pressure in my head give way. The darkness faded from my vision, and the light of the day filled the world again. I stood up and jogged a short distance, until a thirst like I had never felt came over me. I collapsed at the base of a rock and called Reggie over. I took like 25 gulps of water out of my camelback. I realized I had thrown up all over myself at some point while scrambling out of the gully, or maybe before, and had a few deep cuts in my palms and knuckles. Reggie was still shaking like he had just come out of an ice bath, and whining as though he was hurt. I checked him for injuries, but he seemed alright, so I gave him some water and put an arm around him, trying to calm him down a bit. I wiped as much of the dirt and snow-caked vomit off my coat, while keeping an eye and a shotgun barrel trained on the crest of the gully, expecting with a deep dread to see ram horns slowly coming over the crest. But they didn't. After a minute or so, I got my shit together. I took another sip of water, stood up and booked it the entire 3 miles or so back to the truck, jogging the entire way. As soon as I could see my truck, I fumbled my keys out of my coat pocket, unlocked it, and bolted straight for the driver's side door. I threw the dog into the passenger seat, the gun into the back seat, and piled in behind the wheel without even taking my pack off. I fired the engine up and tore down the dirt road much faster than it was safe. I got to the highway and didn't stop until we were in my driveway. It's been 2 weeks since that day, and I still haven't been able to sleep a full night or talk to anyone about it. The hell would I tell people without them thinking I lost my mind? Reggie has never liked sleeping in my bed before, but he's been curled up as close as he can to me every night since then. I have no way to explain what happened out there. I have no clue what it was controlling or possessing that animal, but I know one thing. It felt like there was a person inside that ram. It felt like a person's spirit was stuck in there and desperately wanted out. However, based on the way my dog was acting, I got the feeling that if I did end up helping it, I wouldn't have ever left that gully. I am sincerely terrified in a way I have never known possible. I haven't told this story in a long time. It happened to me in October, about 6 years ago. I told 4 or 5 people since then, and nobody believed me. I had a lot of time to think about it since then, and I think I'm finally ready to post my story somewhere. It's about a weekend I spent in the national forest. I had been planning the trip for weeks. I made sure I had the weekend off work. I didn't make any plans. I started buying supplies a week before I went. I was gonna go camping in the forest near my town. I had been camping before when I was a little kid with my parents, but never as an adult, and never by myself, and never in this forest. So I was pretty excited. Now I'm not stupid. I took all the necessary precautions. I told a few of my friends where I was going, when I was going, and when I would be back. I told them if I go missing to call the cops and all of that. I brought an extra phone battery and enough food and water to last me a fucking week. I even brought along my firearm that my dad gave me when I turned 18. I never shot the damn thing, but I figured it would at least scare off whatever the hell wanted to mess with me. I'm telling you all this so you know that I'm not just some dumb kid who decided that he wanted to take a trip to the forest one day and shit himself because of what he saw. I knew what I was getting into. I was ready, just not for, well, this. So enough backstory, I'll get on with it. I left around 6 in the morning. It's an hour drive from my place, so I was expecting to get there around 7. I ended up getting there at 7:30, but I didn't mind. It was a lovely day. Not a cloud in the sky, great weather, so I was pretty satisfied with the time that I got there. I parked my car a ways away from the forest, in a little clearing off the side of the road where I knew I would find it. I gathered all my things, had a little snack, and headed off towards the forest. The next few hours are kind of boring, so I'll skip over them. All you need to know is that I made my way into the forest and set up camp. I cooked myself lunch on the crummy campfire I made around noon. I saw a pair of birds dancing at each other. I even took a few pictures of some deer I saw with my phone. I couldn't get a good shot, but at least it's proof that I was there. However, something seemed off. You see, the forest is normally kinda loud. Not like city loud, but there's this constant background noise that is always going on. Rustling in the bushes, leaves, birds chirping, and animals prancing around. When I first got into the forest, that was all well and good, but the later it got, the sounds just started to go away. It took the better part of the day for me to notice. Birds stopped chirping, the bushes stopped rustling. I stopped seeing animals too. That's actually what made me notice. At around 4 in the afternoon, I realized that I hadn't seen a bird in a while. It actually kinda creeped me out a little bit, but I brushed it off and kept enjoying the stay. I was feeling kinda lonely, with everything being so quiet, so I called up a friend and talked with him till sundown. After that, I realized it was getting late, so I hung up. I ate again and put out the fire. After a final assessment of my surroundings and looking at the night sky, I crawled into my tent to sleep. I kept my gun loaded right next to where I slept, just in case, you know. Sleeping on the cold ground in the middle of a forest isn't that easy if you aren't used to it. And considering I hadn't done it since I was a child, I was having a little trouble. It was around 2 hours after I had laid down that I started hearing something in nature again. Now, if I had heard bushes rustling a few hours earlier, this would have been cause for celebration. But even Bear Grylls himself would have gotten creeped out if this was the only thing that he had heard all night. So I did what any rational human would have done and clung to the gun like it was the only thing keeping me from falling off a cliff. There was silence for a few minutes. The only thing I could hear was my own shaky breath. Then, no crunching of leaves or snapping of twigs, just the same. It was getting louder, closer to my tent. I tried to peer through the fabric that separated me from nature, but I couldn't make out a silhouette. I clutched the rifle harder, scared as any person would. I remember being sure that I would be safe though. Even bears are rare to attack camps unprovoked. But that natural human fear that was overbearing, making my mind wander and my hands shake. It stopped, close to my tent, just outside my tent. I could feel its presence near me. It was totally silent. I knew it couldn't be a bear. It would be sniffing the tent right now if it was. I doubted it was a deer. They don't come out at night. Perhaps a wolf? They normally travel in packs. And even if it were a lone wolf, it wouldn't be a threat until I heard growling. But nothing. Just silence. And then, a screech. That's when I knew that this thing wasn't anything I had seen before. Nothing makes that sort of sound. It was like a cross between some sort of bird and a human. Like the shit that you hear in movies that possesses people with their heads on backwards make. That's when I let fear take over, in my bladder and in my hands. I fired the gun in its direction, and oh God, was that a mistake. It screeched again, and it scratched the tent, tearing through the fabric, leaving a massive gash in the side. That was my first look at it, if that's even what you could call it. I barely saw a silhouette through the hole in my tent, but I did see its long arms shredding the side of the tent. It was trying to get to me. I fired the gun again, but I must have missed because it didn't flinch. That's when the flight reflex took over the fight, and I only wanted to do one thing: run. I turned around and fiddled with the opening of the tent, trying to keep my eye on the beast attacking me, but also trying to secure my escape as fast as I could. I did it, and dove out of the tent, breaking into a full sprint. Behind me, I heard the thing still tearing into my tent. I thought that maybe it was mistaking its enemy or prey for the tent and not me, but that relief didn't last long. I wasn't far from the tent when I heard it prancing again. It was faster than me, gaining on me. If I tried to outrun it, I would surely be caught. Just then, in what was my crazy thinking, I stopped and dove into a thick bush near me. I remember that many animals in the forest rely on seeing movement more than anything else, so if I could stay still, then it would not see me, and this decision saved my life. It ran past me, stopping in the same place where I stopped. I didn't notice before I hid, but that spot is just under an opening in the trees. A pillar of light penetrated the darkness, and in the moonlight, I could see this thing. It was pale, and it was made even more pale by the white of the moon, and hairless, thin, like it had not ate in weeks. I want to say it looked humanoid, but comparing that thing to a human is just wrong. Its hunchback protruded out, making it look larger than any human. It stood on all fours in such a way that no human could. Its legs bent in such a fashion that it almost resembled a frog, ready to leap. It circled around, silently searching for me. I thought it was about to give up, but it threw its horrendous back upwards, and its legs straightened, and it stood on two legs, like a human, a deformed, horrific human. And then, it looked right at me. It saw me. I know it saw me. Nothing looks at you like that without seeing you. I could tell you the color of its damn eyes, and I bet you that it could tell you the color of mine. I clutched the gun close to my chest, too scared to use it, too scared to move. I closed my eyes and waiting for it to pounce, and then I opened my eyes and it was gone. I didn't move for the rest of the night. I fell asleep in that bush, clutching my gun, until finally being awoken by the sounds of birds. Birds. Thank God, it's birds. It was already daylight. The next morning, I stood up and the things around me seemed normal. The forest was speaking once again, and there were birds and deer everywhere. I stumbled back to my camp to find my things mostly as I had left them. My tent was unsalvageable, but I took my backpack, had something to eat, and then I left, just like I had planned. The entire trek back, I didn't stop looking around for that thing. I didn't let the gun leave my hands either. It wasn't until I got to the car that I relaxed, calling my friend to tell him I was heading home. I didn't tell him about what happened last night. I was still trying to process it myself. Shit, I don't even think I understand what happened until after the car ride home. And that's where the story ends. 6 years ago. And I haven't gone camping since then. I haven't even seen the thing again, nor have I heard of anyone who's seen it. My life has moved on completely, but I will never forget that thing. I will never forget how it stared at me, and then how it just left. It knew I was there, but it left. I don't know why it did that, and I don't think I'll ever get an answer. In the traditional Navajo way, skinwalkers are seen as witches, but they weren't always seen that way. My late grandmother, who was a medicine woman that practiced the blessings way, told me of the origins of the skinwalker. Being a skinwalker wasn't always seen as a bad thing. In fact, they were seen as people with amazing gifts. They could change into the form of any animal, run a certain distance very quickly, mimic people's voices, and some were known to use magic. During the colonization, skinwalkers were used to relay messages between war camps and spy on the enemy without being detected. Having the skinwalker abilities was a gift. Whenever we lost, the good of the community took a backseat and people began to focus on themselves instead of sharing what you had. People began to look after their own families, claiming property and livestock, and there were people that got the short end of the stick. Jealousy is a terrible thing. People became jealous of one another, wanted more fortunate people to lose what they had. They looked to skinwalkers who had otherworldly powers to do their bidding. Now, being a skinwalker is not a gift. You condemn yourself to a life of unhappiness and anger. In order to become a skinwalker, you must sacrifice someone that you love very much. This shows that you are indeed committed to depravity. The interesting thing is that you could have met a skinwalker and not even know it. They are people like you and me. They have chosen a path in which they will hurt other people. We burn clothing and personal items of deceased relatives, and it is very taboo to keep anything that belongs to the dead. Keeping such items can make a person sick or suffer horrible events in their life. However, skinwalkers surround themselves with death. Skinwalkers have been known to grave rob and search through people's garbage. They use bones and hair from the dead and victims' personal items to create bundles. They place these bundles near a person's home, and bad luck will fall upon the person. Now, the reason I bring this up is because the story that I'm about to tell you is about my older sister. In her younger days, my sister was very much interested in the rodeo scene. My family actually has a pretty impressive legacy when it comes to the sport. My sisters didn't compete, but had plenty of friends and family that would go and watch. My two sisters would travel around the Southwest following the rodeo circuit. The cowboy lifestyle isn't always glamorous. It can be filled with alcohol, drugs, and depression. Unfortunately, this took hold of my sister, and she got in trouble with the law. My sister was looking at jail time, and the family was very concerned about what might happen to her. My mother went to a local medicine man, and they talked about the next steps. They decided to have a ceremony for my oldest sister. A few days passed, and it was time for the ceremony. The medicine man and his wife showed up a little past dusk. They came into our house and we served them the food we had made. Everyone chatted for a little bit, and when we finished eating and cleaned up, it was time to start. Everyone sat down in the living room in a circle. The medicine man sat on the far west side of the room. My older sister sat to the left. In the middle of the circle was a large pile of sand that was smoothed out on top. My uncles got hot coals from the fire and placed them on the sand. The medicine man started praying in Navajo and sang blessing songs. This went on into the night. At the height of the ceremony, the medicine man turned to my oldest sister and told her that they would have to go outside and pray in the darkness, and he told her not to look around as he is singing. He told her to keep her eyes on him. The medicine man, my sister, and my uncle went outside. The medicine man turned around and began singing into the darkness. My sister was watching him sing, trying to keep her focus on only him. Then, she heard it. Off in the distance, she heard someone whistle. This made her feel sick to her stomach. Our elders tell us about our culture's taboos, starting at a young age. One of the biggest things that they stress is to never whistle at night. They tell us only the dead whistle at night. So when my sister heard whistling out in the darkness, fear gripped her heart. She was so scared that tears began to well up in her eyes. The whistling got louder and louder, as if whatever it was moving closer and closer. My uncle was outside during the prayer. He admits that he was scared too, but he wanted to be there for my sister. What my uncle saw was even more miraculous. He claims that as the medicine man sang, a bundle came from up above. The eagle feathers that the medicine man was holding opened up like a hand. The bundle gently floated down into the feathers, and the feathers closed around the bundle. The medicine man stopped singing, and the group went back into the house. My sister stumbled in, clearly shaken from the experience. The medicine man could see how my sister was. She then asked him what was whistling. He told her it was a skinwalker, and that he was trying to call the bundle back to it. We gathered around to see what was in the bundle. The medicine man opened up what looked to be a leather pouch. Inside of the pouch was a bone about 1 inch wide and 3 inches long. Upon closer inspection, the bone was hollow, and more items were shoved inside of the bone, held in place with twigs and dirt. He dissected the bone to find hair and pieces of a shirt that belonged to my sister, and a very tiny drawing of a woman behind bars. Whatever was calling out to this bundle had very ill intentions for my sister. Fortunately, after the ceremony, all of my sister's charges were dismissed. I asked my sister what they did with the bundle, and she said that she wasn't really sure. She says that she remembers being very scared when they were outside singing. My sister controls her emotions very well, and so I can't even begin to imagine how scared she must have felt in that moment. So if you ever hear whistling out at night, don't ever acknowledge it. I was on an assignment for the Army, making my way up from San Antonio, Texas, to Tacoma, Washington. It was a long drive, and they gave me 6 days to report to my new unit. But I didn't mind. I love road trips. There is nothing like the freedom of exploring the world by yourself. The first day of my journey, I planned to get as much driving in as possible so I could spend a few days in Utah. A sort of mini vacation, you could say. This was January, and the days were short, so maximizing the amount of daylight I had was crucial. I got up extra early that morning, carried the last of my bags out to my Corolla, signed out of my old unit, and hit the road at roughly 5 a.m. It was an amazing day. I saw the landscape transform around me as I went further west than I had ever been in my life. From the San Antonio metropolitan area to the savannas of the Edwards Plateau to the pancake flat farmland of the Great Plains region, America's headbasket. Finally, the farms opened up into prairie, and I saw the "Welcome to New Mexico, the land of enchantment" sign. Now I really was in the middle of nowhere. Continuing on US Route 380, I eventually found myself in Roswell. I could have gotten a few more hours of driving in and made it to Albuquerque, but I figured since I was in no rush, I might as well see what Roswell had to offer. Who knows if I would get a chance to visit again. As a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious, as Mr. Baldwin would say, I took a self-guided tour of the shops and attractions. The next day, I continued to Albuquerque, then westward on Interstate 40. By the time I reached Gallup and started northbound on US Route 491, I still had 2 hours of driving left before crossing the border into Colorado, and another 45 minutes before I would get to Cortez, my planned stop for the night. However, my daylight was already running out, as sunset was at 6 p.m. I got Starbucks and refreshed myself for the final stretch. It was supposed to be easy, just a straight shot, but looking back on it now, I figured that had I decided to stop in Albuquerque instead of Roswell the night previous, I would have already been in Colorado by now, and possibly be making my way into Utah. I would have saved myself from what was waiting for me on that desolated highway. Route 491 stretched far into the Navajo Nation. On either side of me were endless expanses of prairie bookended by dark indigo mountains on the horizon. To my left, the sky glowed a faint orange-purple, the light slowly dying down like embers in a fire, until finally plunging the land into darkness. Every now and then, I would see the forlorn headlights of another car passing by, which gave me a bit of relief that I wasn't alone. I also had my road trip playlist on to keep me company, and call me ironic, but Hotel California was playing. After passing the small, lonely town of Newcomb, the next piece of civilization would be Shiprock. However, between the two was a 36-mile stretch of absolute nothingness, an abyss I had to cross, and I was not ready for what I was about to witness. After several miles, and having not seen another car on the road, I saw something strange emerge from the horizon, barely lit by the moonlight. I thought it was a road sign at first. Then, as I came closer, I realized it was a person walking on the shoulder of the road, heading in my direction. I squinted, trying my hardest to focus on the figure. In the darkness, I could tell they were wearing a poncho of some sort, with long, black hair flowing down past their chest. Who could be walking out here, all alone, at night, I thought. Whoever it was, they had no lights, no reflectors, no strobes of any kind to signal to passing vehicles that they were there. And they walked on the pavement, dangerously close to oncoming traffic. I pulled to the left a bit, giving them a wide berth. Suddenly, my stereo cut out, as if I had turned it off. The screen went completely dark, and my phone disconnected from Bluetooth. While this was unusual, it did happen from time to time, so I thought nothing of it. As I approached, I saw the person raise their right arm, as if to flag me down and hitch a ride. No, I thought. There's no way that's happening, buddy. As my headlights swept by, I realized it was a man, dressed in a button-up shirt, a poncho, jeans, and cowboy boots. His large belt buckle glinted as the lights passed him, but in that split second, I realized with shock that not only were his eyes painfully wide open, but they seemed to be tracking me. Somehow, he was able to see me through the glare of my headlights and look me dead in the eyes, not breaking contact until I passed. I was shaken for a bit, but my nerves gradually subsided. my stereo turned back on, and my music continued playing. I brushed everything off as simply my imagination. The darkness and the shadows playing tricks on my mind. Besides, the man was behind me. I figured he must have been drunk. Indian reservations, sadly, had high rates of alcoholism. I looked in my rearview mirror, and he was gone. I couldn't see him. Maybe he's too far behind me? No, that couldn't be. It must be too dark. Maybe. I drove on, trying to figure out what just happened, but at the same time, forcing myself not to think about it. Just when I thought I had moved on, I saw another shape in the distance. Getting closer, I realized it was another figure. Another person walking alone at night? There's no way. They walked along the shoulder of the road, swaying back and forth. Slowly, I could make out that this person. Then, I saw what looked like long black hair reaching down past the chest. No, there's no way. It was the man, the same man. But how? The man raised his arm again, trying to flag me down. What does this guy want? I kept up my pace, with no intention of stopping for any reason. Just like last time, my stereo turned off again. Suddenly, the man leaped out into the road, arms waving frantically. I swerved into the left lane, narrowly avoiding him. In my headlights, I noticed he had the same wide-eyed look, his gaze locked into mine. I also saw that his clothes did not look as they did on the first encounter. Once they were clean, if not well worn, but now they were soiled and tattered, rags barely hanging onto his withered frame. His hair was wild and unkempt, with clods of dried dirt stuck in the locks, but his eyes remained the same. My heart nearly burst through my chest at the sudden shock. Hyperventilating, I slowed down and glanced into the rearview mirror to make sure he was alright. Nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to see. The man was running, and he was sprinting towards me. I centered the wheel and accelerated, hoping to get as much distance from him as possible. But as I continued to speed up, so did he. Faster and faster I drove, but every time I looked in the mirror, I would still see him right behind me, perfectly keeping pace, his body tinted red by my taillights. I could feel my head throbbing and my hands getting slick with sweat on the steering wheel. I was sick to my stomach. There's no way. I looked forward, hoping to see a faint glimmer of light from the town ahead, but I was still too far away. I looked back at the rear view mirror, and the man was gone. I should have been relieved, but I knew better. Where did he go? I looked around, hoping to regain a visual on him. I couldn't see anything. Taking a deep breath, I refocused on the road, but kept my guard up. Just keep driving, I told myself. Only a few more miles to go. Out of the corner of my right eye, I saw something. Another shape. It wasn't the man. At least, I didn't think so. I glanced over, bracing myself for whatever was going to meet my sight. It looked like an animal, some kind of animal, though I couldn't make out exactly what it was. Under the moonlight, I could see it running alongside my car, its limbs reaching out in long strides, its back undulating like a dog. Closer and closer it came. The closer it was, the more of it I could see, little by little. Then I noticed Its limbs were far too long for its body. Its body was too short. It had no tail. The head was round, and from it came a trail of long, black hair. I slammed my foot on the gas, pushing my car's engine harder than it had ever been pushed before. By now, I was clocking well over 110. But this creature, it was keeping up. It wasn't phased. It simply ran faster and faster to match my speed. Just what was this thing? How could anyone or anything run this fast? This entity seemed to have endless stamina. Just how long could it keep this up? Just how much faster could it go? Soon, I knew my car would hit its top speed. And then what? How long could it maintain that before breaking down? It wouldn't be long until my engine overheats. But regardless, I would eventually run out of gas. And when I do, what would happen if that thing got me? At 120 miles per hour, my car had reached its limit. This was the fastest I could go, but the creature continued its pursuit. My temperature gauge was approaching the red, and so was my tachometer. I couldn't keep this up any longer. Suddenly, like the beacon of a lighthouse on a tumultuous sea, the first light of Shiprock came into view. It was close, so close. If I could just go a little longer, I could make it into town, to safety. I pressed on. I fixed my eyes on the lights, growing brighter on the horizon. They bloomed outwards, glimmering in the night air. Though it was a small town, it was a sight for sore eyes in my situation. Looking in my periphery, I saw the undulation of the creature's spine as it kept pace with my car. But now it was slipping away, steering far and further from the road. It suddenly hit me just how hard my heart was beating. Beads of sweat dripped down my face. I looked over. The creature was gone. But this time, the feeling of dread had also gone with it. My stereo once again turned back on, and as my music resumed, I took a breath of deep sigh of relief. I let off the accelerator. This man, the creature, whatever it was finally gone for good. Having white-knuckled the steering wheel the whole time without realizing it, my hands were extremely sore, but I was glad to have made it through. A week later, I told another soldier in my unit about what I experienced. Being originally from Albuquerque, she was familiar with the Native American legends of the Southwest. The conversation steered towards a certain creature that she would not dare speak the name of. She also told me that the highway I took was well known for all sorts of paranormal phenomena. Google what Route 491 used to be called, and everything will make sense. Be careful out there. To give you a little more insight about me, this story happened when I was 14 years old. I was at my friend Emily's house, since back then I lived there for personal reasons. Anyways, it was about 1 in the morning, and her parents were gone for the night. We were watching scary movies and eating out on snacks like we usually would every weekend night. After our movie, I got up to go to the restroom, and I let my friend know that I would be back. She nodded before opening up her laptop to message her boyfriend at the time. As I walked down the dark hallway and I was coming across the bathroom, I heard my friend's voice call out to me, but it was coming from the back porch that was on the right side of the hallway, which immediately struck me as odd. because I never seen her leave the room or even walk past me. And why would she be outside anyways at this time? Her voice called out to me again, so I couldn't help it but walk out to the back porch. It does take a lot to scare me after all, so I wasn't bothered by this. As it turns out, it was the biggest mistake ever. A red flag should have went off right then and there when her voice became silent as I stepped outside. I called her name softly, but she didn't reply. I called her name once more, but this time, louder. And again, nothing but silence. I stepped off the porch into the grass looking into her wooded backyard, a little pissed off now because at that time, I figured she was trying to prank scare me, like she always was. It was a normal thing for her, but when I yelled her name again, a voice spoke. But it wasn't hers. It was another woman's voice. "Help me, please. For the love of God, help me." Okay, now I was officially freaked out because there was no one around for miles besides her one neighbor that lives a little ways into the woods. I found myself not being able to move. Curiosity maybe? But the bushes started rustling and what looked like a dog stepped out. At first I thought it was her neighbor's dog that must have gotten out again because it has happened before. But when this thing stood up on its hind legs, it was about 7 feet tall. That's when I really froze up. What the hell was this thing? I asked myself. I never met any human that's this tall in my entire life. Then it started to move towards me. It was walking kind of like a human, but wobbling like a baby taking its first steps. I found myself not being able to move, to get out of there like I should have. That is, until I heard the slider door being opened, and the real Emily's voice speak. "Lana, what are you doing outside? I looked around my whole house for you." As soon as she finished her sentence, I ran inside as fast as I could and pulled my friend inside before shutting the door and locking it while closing the blinds. I did this to every room, even the basement, locking all the windows included. All the while, Emily yelling at me, asking me what the fuck was going on. I took her arm and raced into her room before slamming her door behind us. When she finally realized how terrified I was and how badly I was shaking, only then did she ask me, "Jesus, Lana, what's the matter? You look like you just seen a ghost." I finally calmed down enough to begin to tell her what I encountered, but before I got the chance to fully explain what happened, I heard extreme banging on my friend's window, which shocked us both and we both shot up at least 10 feet in the air. I whispered, "Fuck." I realized I forgot to shut the blinds. I didn't have the heart to turn around, but when Emily's face went pale, I didn't have a choice but to look behind me. I really wish I hadn't. There, that thing was, looking into our bedroom window. I couldn't even begin to explain what it looked like. All I can come up with is that its body was twisted like someone that had just been in a freakish car accident, and it had fur, lots of it. And the eyes glowed much like a cat. A high-pitched noise escaped that thing's throat, making us not only cover our ears, but we both screamed as hard as our lungs would let us. I threw my friend on the floor before zooming into her parents' room to get her dad's .42 rifle. But when I came back, the noise stopped, and that creature was gone. Emily was rocking back and forth, holding her knees close to her, shaking and crying. She saw its face as clear as I did. The rest of the night, we had all the lights on in the house, and we stayed huddled together in the living room with the rifle right under my legs. Finally, after what seemed like years, the sun rose, and her parents walked through the door. Instantly, her dad noticed our fear-stricken expressions and his gun under my legs. They sat down and softly asked both of us what happened. When I explained it, they shared worried glances before announcing that we were moving. We never asked why. We were just happy to get the hell out of there. We moved that exact day to my family's vacation home in a very populated city with little to no trees. When my own parents got home, and we told them they had the same reactions. And they told me I could never go out after dark alone and to stay away from wooded areas. Of course, I never questioned it. And to this day, I don't know if it was a skinwalker that some people believe in, or if it was an imposter. What I do know, though, that it was not human. My mom recently shared a strange and creepy experience that she and her sibling and parents witnessed when she was younger, at around 6 years of age. My mom is not the type of person to lie about this just to scare someone. And also, my aunts and uncles have verified the story individually. My grandparents, mother, aunts, and uncles lived in a small pueblo, a small town, in Mexico with a population of about 1,000 people. They were all scattered throughout the landscape. They lived at the bottom of one of the larger cerros, or hills, that would take a couple of hours to get to the very top. My abuelitos were very poor. My grandfather was making just enough to provide for their necessities by working at a sugar cane field. But yet they were living in one of the nicer homes because of its proximity to the hill and what everyone would say, a witch's house at the top of that hill. Everybody around there stayed away from that house, and the rent was the cheapest there was out of everything else, out of all the other houses that were available. My abuelitos, grandparents, tias y tios, aunts and uncles, and my mom had some paranormal experiences in that house. Most of these were attributed to the witch in typical Mexican folklore fashion. This thing that they witnessed, however, was what made them leave. Mi madre, my mom, says that one day she was inside at the entrance of the home with the door wide open, playing with some toys. My tios and tias, aunts and uncles, were in the same room behind her also, while my abuelito was relaxing on a rocking chair in that room. She said she was playing and the door to the house was open. As she looked up, as a medium-sized black dog was walking along the road in front of the home. What spooked her was that this dog had 2 human breasts hanging from its chest that were connected to its skin as if it was part of its body. She says that the breasts were hairless, which allowed her to see that they were indeed the breast of a human and not some sort of tumor on the dog. My mom says that the dog instantly gave her a very bad feeling and she started to cry. My mom's crying then caused the dog to stop in its tracks and look into the doorway towards my mom. That's when my grandfather got up and headed towards the door, as so did my uncles, to see what was happening. He instantly recognized what the creature was and pulled out a small gun he always carried with him because of the long treks he made on foot to his job. He aimed the gun and tried pulling the trigger, but the gun kept jamming and would not fire. He tried it a few times, each time checking and making sure the gun was in proper working order, but it simply would not fire. All the while, the dog was just standing there, watching. The dog eventually turned and started running down the road and into some overgrowth along the side of the road. After it disappeared from view, my grandfather tried shooting his gun and it fired without a hitch. Even though they were very limited financial wise, they moved out within a week after this encounter. Unfortunately, both of my grandparents passed when I was very young, so I cannot ask them about this event. I also never heard of skinwalkers partially changing, turning, and I found this story quite interesting. Sometimes, when we gather together as a family, joking and playing and having a good time, I tell my mom to bring up this story just to give everybody a spook. In a quick summary, that she saw a black dog with human breast hanging from its chest. Grandfather's firearm jammed when he was trying to fire at the dog, and then the gun started working perfectly fine once this dog ran away. Most of my family, when they hear this story, believe it was the bruja, the witch, who lived on top of the cerro, the hill, who apparently, they always say, was a nagual. I'm not Navajo, or Native, or even Indian, but I have a skinwalker story. So here it goes. I go along with a friend to check out his grandfather's hogan. For those who don't know, a hogan is basically an old traditional Navajo dwelling place, mostly made out of logs and mud, with a door traditionally facing east. Anyways, his grandfather is in the hospital for a spell. My friend says that his grandfather had an accident there on the property. We get to the place and we're hanging out for a while, drinking some beers and sharing a blunt. When out of nowhere, my friend goes real still and puts his finger up to his lips like he wants me to be quiet. I hear this shuffling noise coming from just outside. And just an FYI, my friend has dark skin. So as I look at him, his face turns several shades more pale. The shuffling noise becomes more loud, as if someone is coming towards the door. My friend grabs a piece of burning firewood out of the stove. He goes over to the door and hurls it out in front of the hogan. We then hear it hit the ground, and immediately there is this high-pitched laughter, something like the Wicked Witch of the West. Every hair on my body stands up. My friend starts yelling out in some native language. All I can do is pull out my pocket knife and hold it up to be ready. The person outside just keeps laughing, and I finally get the cojones to move over towards the door and peek out. My heart nearly jumps out of my chest. Only several feet from me is this skinwalker. It's leaning up against the wall just to the right, thin and scraggly, covered with these animal skins, and staring back at me with these eyes like black marbles. I'm convinced it's a woman, as I see what looks to be breasts beneath the skins, but thin and sagging, like she's really old. Her face is covered with splotches of hair, and I can't tell if it's real or some kind of get-up. I let out a bit of scream, though I hate to admit it, and it just turns and jogs off towards the hills to the other side of the hogan. That's the only time I've seen a skinwalker since, and I hope I never see one again. I grew up in Winslow, Arizona, but also lived for a period of time on the reservation near the Puerco River. My grandparents have a home, which is more to the east and not all that far from the New Mexico state line. When my mother and aunts were children, they lived further west. Their house was in a wooded area, and though there were neighbors, there wasn't that many. When I was young, I often heard stories of skinwalkers, but never really believed until I got older, and after my grandmother, a Christian woman, not prone to superstition or telling lies, shared with me and my cousins an encounter that occurred when my mother and her sisters, my aunts, were still small children. They were living at the time in a 3-bedroom house, full wood construction, surrounded by a small fence, and with chicken wire around the front porch. One night, when all the children are in bed, and my grandfather is off working, she is awakened by a noise that she hears outside. She gets up out of bed, and in the dark, makes her way out to the living room. It is then that she hears something up on the roof of the house. She said that she knows immediately what it is. Her first instinct is to go out to the front porch and curse the creature that has picked her and her family as a target. As she makes her way to the front door, she hears it walking around over her head. Then, as soon as she starts to open the door to go out, she hears it jump down by the side of the porch, open the porch door, come up to the steps, and right up to the kitchen window, only about 10 feet away from where my grandmother is standing. She says that she is really scared now, but as the porch light is on, she thinks that she can take a peek through the window and see what is out there. Just as she starts to pull aside the curtain, her whole body freezes, as if she has no control over it whatsoever. However, she can hear just fine, and whatever is out there on the porch starts to scratch at the kitchen window, as if it's trying to get into the house. My grandmother says she starts praying and asking God to make whatever it is go away. And this is before she becomes a Christian. Finally, the creature gives up and leaves. Once it is gone, my grandmother is able to move again. She says she knows it was a skinwalker. Her own mother had often shouted into the night, and her father would shoot with a shotgun into the darkness whenever a skinwalker came around their whole gun. The next morning, when my grandfather comes home from work, she tells him what happened. He takes the ladder and goes up into the roof and discovers a bundle of dry grass and twigs placed there alongside of the chimney. He tells her that the skinwalker might have wanted to start a fire in order to get her and the girls out of the house. Later that day, one of the older men from the reservation comes by the house and puts ash over the doorway. Even to this day, my grandmother swears that she knows who that skinwalker was. But what's more weird or strange is that she's never told us, and even now she won't say who it was. In Arizona, there is an older woman who lives not far from my grandmother's house. She works about halfway to Gallup, New Mexico, maybe about 20 minutes away from my grandmother's house. On cold mornings, she gets up before the sun to start her car and let it warm up before she makes the drive. Her house is surrounded by a dark wood fence, which is about 5 feet tall. This one morning, as she is making her way out to the car, she hears voices that seem to be chanting and giggling. She thinks they are coming from over by this low hill to the east of her house and back from the road. She walks over to the fence and takes a look, but it's still dark and the hill is covered with trees and bushes. She doesn't see anything or anyone, and the voices have stopped. She doesn't give it another thought, goes about her usual morning routine, and eventually leaves for work. A few nights later, she is bringing in her laundry from the outside line when she hears really loud music coming from the neighbor's yard across the street. She decides to be nosy and walks over to the fence to see which one of the boys it is, thinking that maybe she can ask him to lower the volume some. Just as she gets to the fence, she sees a dark figure step from the trees on that low hill and make its way down towards the street. It's moving kind of funny, as if it's not accustomed to its own body. She screams, and it starts to run really fast towards the young man playing the boombox. He must have heard her, because she says he lowered the volume. However, when she turns back around to see where the figure has gone to, it's now gone. She says that she was certain that it was a skinwalker. There's an old crow story dating back to the turn of the 20th century about a man and his daughter driving their wagon along one of the back dirt roads of the reservation. They're on their way to the market. The daughter, about 10 years of age, notices an old woman up ahead. She is limping along the middle of the road and mumbling to herself. Just then, her father moves the horse pulling the wagon, and it breaks into a faster pace, trolling up alongside the old woman. As soon as the father is in reach, he raises his buggy whip and trashes the woman across the back. Then and there, right before the eyes of the little girl, the old woman withers down in size, turns into a coyote, and runs off into the trees by the roadside. Her father, not in the least bit surprised, turns to her and says, "Let that be a lesson to you." The canyons throughout the four corners, for those who don't know, Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico, Nevada fits in there too, are populated with signs and indications of the presence of the ancestors of the tribes native to the area. Most common are petrographs and petroglyphs, drawings on stones, the remains of cliff dwellings, and ancient roads, which seem to run to nowhere. There are also man-made structures of stone houses and temples. Most of these areas are accessible to visitors. However, they are also monitored by local and tribal authorities, which protect them and ensure their preservation. That being said, it is not uncommon to find graffiti and other evidence of disregard for these historical sites. Several years ago, a friend of mine, a local Hopi guide for the tourists, and I are poking around these ruins. It's already dark, but if you are going to go to these places for the reason we go, see if there's anything of value that hasn't yet been recovered. You have to go at a time you're likely not to be seen. I have gone to other similar places with this guy, and we had some luck with small relics that tourists will buy. By the way, I am Hopi as well. We are only there for a short period when we hear something moving towards the ridge and only a few yards from where we are. My friend takes a pistol from his waist and points it over to the trees. He's calling out in our native language some words we both know and which are generally used to ward off dark spirits. By the sound of things, whatever is out there is getting more bold and coming closer, but we still can't see anything. At the same time, there is this feeling of dread building up inside of me, and I'm thinking too how nice it would be to have a pistol instead of the flashlight that I am carrying. At this time, we're both thinking Skinwalker. But that's just part of who we are as Hopi. My friend then starts backing the two of us towards the edge, running up and over our heads. Just then, this sharp, yipping sound breaks out, followed by this sustained high-pitched scream, which slices right through me like an icy wind. I find myself praying before I realize I am doing it already. My friend is starting to chant in Hopi, his voice filled with fear. We both have no doubt it is a skinwalker, and it is coming right at us. I lift my flashlight and point its bright beam in the direction of that blood-chilling screech. The skinwalker, still in the dark, responds by making this throat mucus-filled sound, a sort of coughing noise. I am waving the light all around trying to get a glimpse of it. Just then, I guess my friend can't take it anymore and starts firing his pistol, the rounds tearing through the bushes. I drop for cover and duck my head, saying the Hail Mary the whole time. When he stops firing, I look up in time to see this dark shape run up the sheer slope of the ridge, just to the other side of the trees and brush. We didn't hang around to see where it went, leaving the ruins behind and getting back to our truck. So if you ever go anywhere near the Four Corners, don't stay past nighttime. And whatever you do, don't venture out into any native man-made structures, temples, or anything related to ancient native tribes. You might just come across a skinwalker. I myself am not Navajo, but my friend is. He grew up around Gallup, New Mexico. He loves to tell me stories about skinwalkers. He knows it gives me the chills. According to him, they are not like werewolves, but are dark spirits that use the skins or even the flesh of anything living that may serve its purpose. They will also use animal parts as totems. For example, they will take the claws from a bear or the antlers from a deer. They are known to come after humans too, but he says that's a native thing and that white people have nothing to worry about. He says the only way to make it stop bothering you is to take away its disguise. The scariest story he tells is about this Navajo trucker that his father knows. Every night he makes the long run to the reservation from Gallup. One night, when halfway there, he hears a loud noise against the front passenger side of his truck. Thinking he might have hit something, he pulls off to the shoulder of the road to take a look, but he finds nothing, not even a mark or dent on the fender. So he gets back on the road and resumes driving. But only a few seconds later, he sees something in his rearview mirror towards the middle of the road and moving up on him. And it's not another vehicle. Then, just as suddenly as it appears, it's gone. Shrugging it off, he goes back to paying attention to the road, with his semi going about 60 miles per hour. He chances to look in his mirror, and again, he sees this thing chasing him, and it is moving fast. Just like that, it's at his driver's door, and holding onto the handle and striding along. Then, without warning, it turns to him with its dog-like face and dull, dark eyes, and smashes in the window. The driver slams on the brakes. The cab of the truck goes into a slide, the trailer jackknifing past him. The whole time, this creature is holding on to the door and reaching in through the broken window trying to grab him. Somehow, the truck comes to a stop, blocking both lanes of the road straight across. The driver is so scared, he doesn't even notice the creature is gone, and instead throws the door open and runs off into the desert. Now, he must have passed out or something, because he awakes with the sun coming up and finds himself huddled by this rock formation. He's dusty, a little dirty, and missing his shirt, but is otherwise unharmed. Sitting there getting his bearings, the events of the previous night come back to him. He gets up to his feet, dusts himself off, and walks out back to the highway, not knowing what to expect with his truck. However, as he reaches the road, he sees it parked as neat as it can be there on the shoulder. When he gets up to it, he sees there's nothing wrong with the driver's door window. It's as if he imagined the whole thing. He does notice, however, a series of small scratches on the driver's door all around the handle, as if something was clawing at it. These marks were not there previously. My grandfather told me a story once, as we sat around a campfire in his backyard in the cool night of the Arizona desert. The horizon was clear, and each star twinkle in a purple sky, with a full fat moon hanging low over the mountains. His voice was raspy, the result of a lifetime of smoking cigars and drinking whiskey. The fire danced and shined across his wide dark eyes as he settled into his seat, ready to tell his story. Way back when I was a boy, about your age, I lived outside a reservation with your great-grandfather. He had returned from the war and set about raising horses and cattle on a 100-acre ranch settled between a brambly mountainside with good dirt for growing thorn brush and not much else. One night, my mother was sick, and Pa and I took a trip into town, about 50 miles away, straight through a dry desert, over a washed-out creek and some old abandoned farmsteads. Pa and I were driving in an old Ford pickup truck. I remember it was dark out, inky and thick, with only the lights of our old truck lighting up the road. I remember it so much. The engine began to sputter, and the truck slowed to a jerky stop. Damn it, Pa said, guiding the Ford to the side of the road. As it coasted to a stop, my pa said, "Stay here, son," and he stepped out into the darkness, shutting the door with a heavy thud. My window was down, and the cool desert air was breezy and felt good on my hot face and neck. Pa was getting water from the back to cool down the engine, and that's when I smelled it. Rotten eggs. Strange, I thought, to smell sulfur in the desert. My nose also picked up the smell of one of those dead, bloated cattle that would drop from the heat and lay there until the crows pecked enough holes in their hide to cause the whole thing to explode. It stunk, and I gagged. My skin started to tingle too. The back of my neck felt itchy, and my face started to get very hot. The wind stopped blowing, with the stink filling the cab. "Pa," I called out. No answer. My heart started beating, and I felt such a fear in me, in my bones, in my chest. I tell you, I never felt fear like this. Not until Vietnam. Not until I saw men dying around me. I locked the door and reached over for my pa's door and saw a shadow bound across the road through both dim beams of light across the partly open hood. Grandfather paused telling the story. He spit a fat piece of tobacco to his side, and he looked very pensive into the darkness. I realized I was holding my breath and gasped for air. The night was breezy, but I was sweating and clammy. "What about your father? What did you see?" My grandfather, continuing the story, sighed. "A creature." He shook his head. "You have to understand, there were legends. Old legends. Much older than what's out there in the valley. Older still than Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull, than the old chiefs and their shamans, the Apache and Hopi and Cherokee, and all them old tribes and First Peoples. They told tales. They told stories about dark magic. Something about a deal made with the old spirits of blood sacrifice to gain power. Old power. Enough to fight each other and the Spaniards, and later the white men that came for their land and women. They called them." He paused. Grandfather took a deep breath and looked towards the fire, to the sky, the desert, the creek, the moon, the sun, and then leaned a little bit and said, "They would call them skinwalkers, old warriors resurrected as skinless men, walking on deer legs with the torso of a man and the head of a coyote, but they were messed up, long and disfigured, teeth like a Bowie knife, long arms, and standing 7 feet tall, even hunched over. They would gut the old cowboys and white riders. They'll run through the bullets, part the Spanish armor like it was a potato sack. And boy, could they change their voice to match a person you knew or might know. And that's what I saw. Big and fast. Only for a second, it ran across the road, gray and molted, muscle flexing under its legs, clumping on the road, stringy muscle hunched shoulders. And it turned, looked right into the cab, and looked at me, right into my eyes. And I swear, it grinned at me. I sank into my seat. In fear, shaking, I knew my death was coming. I smelled ozone and brimstone. The air felt like right before the lightning comes and blows a tree to smithereens, charged and full with power. I yelled for Pa, but no words came out, just a dry squeak. I started to shake as my grandfather told his story. He was still here, so I knew he lived. but the supernatural always fascinated me, and even now, I felt the force of his words. The real power of skinwalkers was trickery. Sure, they could change their voices, but also their skin. That's why the gods took their hide, so they could take others. Not for long, the legend says, maybe an hour, before the soul of the skin that they were wearing would come looking for their mortal shell before going to whatever hell awaited them. Even though I think that getting skinned alive was hell enough. A minute passed in what felt like a lifetime. 1 second and 1,000 years. My father's door opened, and I jerked my head to the left, putting up my hands to fend off an attack. "Son, it's me," my father said. Before climbing into the cab, he got the steering wheel and pulled himself in an awkward way, jerking himself into the seat. I cringed into the corner. I looked at him. I looked hard. Your great-grandfather was a good man. Treated me and my mom right. He fought the Nazis and saw the worst of man in Poland when he freed all those camps. And now, I was taking his measure. Is this my father? Do I make a run? Or do I die? Is it him or not? Let's go get that medicine for your mom, as he pulled the truck into gear and pulled it out into the road. And our trip resumed. I guess it was him after all. But how did you know? Was it because he said something about your mom? I knew, because out the window, out the corner of my eye, I saw that same beast running 50 miles an hour right next to our car, looking at me with those yellow eyes and grinning mouth. I looked and saw it, hunched and angry, running next to us. My pa kept his eyes on the road, looking straight ahead. "Son," he said, "don't look at it." That's how I knew it was my dad. He knew what to do, and he kept telling me to just keep looking straight ahead and to not look at whatever was around us, running. He then told me that by acknowledging its presence, you give it power. That's where my grandfather finished the story. I kept staring at him, but by this time, he was just looking straight ahead, looking around me, and said we should go inside. As we went inside the house, he then told me to not ever mention skinwalkers. He also said that speaking their name out loud or mentioning them at all, even in text, even in stories, even if someone else is telling you a story, is supposed to make them aware of your existence. To give some perspective on the scenario, we live in an apartment complex at the edge of town in Illinois. Right next to us is a woody area full of coyotes and deer and lots of birds, so it's pretty lively. Last night at 3 a.m., my fiance went outside to grab a case of water from the trunk of our car, and when she was grabbing it, she claimed she heard someone say, "Hello," in a girl's voice coming from the woods. She said she couldn't see anything, but she replied back, confused, saying hello back. Whatever it was, ended up saying, "Can somebody help me?" And that's when she got the chills and ran as fast as she could back inside our house. Right before she entered the house, she said that she heard it again, with the voice getting closer, asking for help. But instead of a normal girl voice, it turned into a girl voice that didn't even sound real, and she couldn't explain the change in the voice. She said afterwards, thinking about it, that her voice sounded familiar, but couldn't point out whose voice. why I believe she wasn't BSing around is because 2 years living here, we never talked about things like this. And when she rushed inside, she startled me because her face was in shock and she was breathing heavily, almost like I thought she seen something or heard a gunshot. I don't know. My question is, she thinks it was a skinwalker, because who would be out at 3 a.m. asking for someone to help them in the woods? What do you guys think? I also read online that you aren't supposed to interact nor share the encounter that you had about a skinwalker. She will be alright this one time sharing the story. I hope. This next story comes from Gallup, New Mexico. A Navajo woman, now in her late 60s, recalls a time when she is yet a little girl. She has this feeling there is someone outside their house. She runs to her father, who is still in bed, the sun just starting to come up. After finally begging her father to get up, he gets out of bed, puts on some shoes, and goes out to the yard to check. Walking around towards the side of the house to which her bedroom is situated, he notices what appears to be a coyote or dog prints there in the soil directly below her window. The strangest thing out of all this is that there is a trail consisting of only one clear print, and beside it, a round impression, which seems to sit a bit deeper. If there was a coyote outside her window, it was standing upright and on one canine-like foot, and something that's not canine-like. While he is making his way back into the house, something across the way catches his eye. There, upon a small hill to the other side of the dirt road, is a strange-looking old man. His eyes refracting the early sunlight, his hair long and yellowing, and his clothes worn and dirty, ripped apart. But what's more strange out of all this is that he is standing there, barefoot, missing the lower part of his other leg, and supporting himself with the aid of a simple cane of wood. This story is from Fort Belknap. 2 of my friends and I are by the street in front of my house, hanging out and talking. I noticed down the block, a ways underneath the halo of the street light, there's this dog. It's just sitting there, but it definitely is not one of the dogs from around the neighborhood, and there's something about it that just doesn't look right to me. I turn to my friends to see what they think, and when they look to where I'm pointing, the dog is gone. And out of nowhere, there's this guy dressed in some grubby clothes, long dirty hair, maybe in his late 20s or early 30s, and definitely in need of a shave. The funny thing though is that he's walking straight towards us and getting closer, but we still can't make out his eyes, almost as if he doesn't have any. Even though we were 3 against 1, without saying a word, we all just started running towards my house. Right up the porch we go, slamming the door behind us. No sooner are we inside, it's like every dog in the neighborhood is barking and whining as if they are scared. Then, just like that, everything gets real quiet, as if somebody hit the mute button. I'm not sure how long we stayed there crouched down low and against the wall beneath the windows. But finally, one of my friends elbows me in the shoulder and tells me with his head that I should take a look outside. Not wanting to look like a complete pussy, I move the curtain aside and peek out. I don't see anything, so I go and open the door. Whoever that guy was, he's gone, and everything seems as it always is. Needless to say, we hung out on the porch for the rest of the night. This story comes out of Arizona. 3 siblings are returning home to the reservation for a weekend visit with their parents. Their trip is taking them from Phoenix to the family home in Low Mountain and Pinyon. It's a trip of about 5 hours. They leave fairly late in the evening. As they approach Keams Canyon Highway, they turn onto a dirt road leading straight into Low Mountain. Just before they reach the dirt road, they notice an old lady bent from age and walking with a cane on the side of the highway. It is about 2 o'clock in the morning. She has a scarf over her head and a long black jacket beneath, and she is also wearing a green dress. Their only thought is that it's a late hour for walking along an isolated highway, pretty much in the middle of nowhere. The reservation is really dark at night, and there is barely anyone driving on the roads. After they pass the old woman, they make the turn onto the dirt road. A mile later, they notice the same old lady, bent and walking with her cane there on the side of the dirt road. Spooked by the incident and finding no explanation that would provide for the woman's presence, they had been passed by no other vehicle since turning onto the back road. The older brother, who is driving, steps on the gas and puts distance between them and the roadside specter. Together, the 3 of them recite some words in Navajo to protect them from any dark medicine. Eventually, they reach the highway that leads to Chinle. As they come to the first overpass, they see that same old lady sitting on the shoulder pavement with her head down and waving the cane in the air. Before they can pass her by, the car stalls out and they are required to roll to a stop a short distance past the woman. Desperately, the older brother attempts to get the car started, but there's no response. At this point, with all 3 of them panicking, the old lady stands up, facing the opposite way, so they can't see her face, and she walks to the other side of the road. Once there, she turns her head for but a moment, and they see that her face is painted black. She keeps walking and eventually disappears in the distance. Now, out of sight, the brother again turns the key in the ignition and the car starts. They make it to their parents' home with no further encounters. When they tell their parents about the experience, their fathers tells them of an old Navajo couple with a house back in the trees somewhere between the 2 highways. They are rumored to practice bad medicine and bewitch people. From what he knows, the old man passed away recently, and ever since then, the old woman has been frequently seen at night, walking the highways and the back roads. I heard this account from a guy that I knew. He was my friend when we were in a small town in Oklahoma with a decent size native population. Anyways, this guy, he's not actually Navajo, but he's Mexican. He's the nicest dude you would ever want to meet. He was about 35 at the time. He had a family. He was honest, a good-natured guy that I could never see making something up for no reason. But we were hanging out one night and we were telling scary stories, and he was telling me about the most scariest situation that he's ever been in. He said he was driving back to the US after visiting family in Mexico. His wife was in the passenger seat, asleep. He wasn't too far from the border, so he decided to keep driving a little after midnight instead of stopping somewhere for the night. It was sort of a desert type road. He says he was going about 65 miles per hour when he noticed something in his peripheral vision out in the darkness out the passenger window, and it was keeping up with him. Obviously, this got him shook. He hit the gas. 70, 75, 80, 85, and it was still keeping up with him. At this point, he thought he was going crazy. He thought it was just his tiredness playing tricks on his eyes, until it changed directions. Instead of moving parallel with his car, it began to angle back towards the road, in a manner almost to intercept the vehicle. As it got closer, more light hit it, and he said it looked like a human. He told me it was slightly shadowed from the darkness, but he was for sure it was a humanoid form. He then accelerated to 90, and a few seconds later, it angled back into the darkness and was gone. As he finished telling me the story, I could tell his eyes were welled up, and his hands were trembling. And this was a tough, no BS dude. It physically struck him to the core just to recall it. Not surprising, he said he has never gone back to Mexico in a vehicle. Now, he said that whenever he does go visit, he only goes on flights. I was in prison for 15 years. There was a skinwalker in there with us. A little background first. I was serving a 15-year sentence in a penitentiary in South Arizona. What I was in there for isn't important, but when I was staying there were countless things that happened that no one could explain, and even more that no one wanted to know more about. It all started with a prison legend. They said that years ago, something awful and unexplainable happened in the prison. Every morning we would wake up and be expected to stand near the front of our cells, while guards visually confirmed we were present and accounted for. Apparently, about a year before I got sent there, the most brutal and unexplainable thing happened during one of those routines. A man who had a cell to himself looked very off. When the guard saw this, he pulled over another guard to help him check it out. They found it wasn't actually the prisoner they were expecting at all. It was a totally different man. And this man was wearing the skin of the other man over him. But apparently, it looked like a real monster. The scariest thing was that the guy wearing the skin was not an inmate. They had no idea how he even got into the prison. What's worse is that they couldn't even figure out who the hell he was. He wasn't documented anywhere. And what's worse than that, they never even found the body of the man of the skin he was wearing. Pretty scary stuff, I know. And I realize that's not the go-to definition of a skinwalker. But that's what the prison called him, the skinwalker. It didn't help out that the guy never talked apparently. Anyways, that's what started the whole skinwalker superstition around the yard. Apparently, the guy got shipped to a different spot about a month after it happened, and just about everyone here felt all the better for it. I heard about the story on the second day of my stay. Hell of a story to hear, to place in your home for the foreseeable future. Now, on to the real shit though. Sure, that guy was the skinwalker, but all he did in the long run was get an old Navajo inmate to tell everyone about actual skinwalkers. It seemed like a lot of the prison culture actually revolved around them. Now apparently, skinwalkers are tricky to point out on the spot, but if you manage to survive around one for more than a minute or two, almost everyone can tell the mannerisms. They can mimic human speech, but not replicate it. They twitch manically. They have an unnatural gait while walking, but apparently they got better with experience. The old Navajo guy, his name was Carl, said that he was sure there was an actual one among the prisoners, slowly picking us off over the years. He called it the Grandmaster Skinwalker at one point. Apparently he thought it had human mannerisms down so well that you might not even been able to tell if it was your cellmate for a day or two. He would expect the Skinwalker to jump at any opportunity for a kill. But this one realized it had a revolving door of people to kill coming to it. A lot of guys found humor in it. A lot more were really on the edge about it. And every once in a while, in prison, people snap. Sometimes you will find your cellmate swinging in front of the bunk, strung up around the neck by his pants. Sometimes you just can't take it anymore. But in our yard, people tended to snap in a very special way. It wouldn't be an outburst at dinner or a silent suicide in the night. Guys would just stop talking, hunch over, and shuffle around. Any friendships they had would be mostly out the window. They would turn into a loner during rec time. They would let their hair hang in front of their face. No one liked to talk about it. Like, if they did, it would happen to them next. I felt the same way too. I didn't know if it was a skinwalker or people just going crazy. But I didn't want to find out. It wasn't clockwork or anything. But every time someone snapped in this way, it wasn't more than a couple weeks before they were, quote, shipped off or, quote, transferred to God knows where without anyone else knowing beforehand. Then there were nighttime occurrences. Short and a loud burst of sound echoed through my cell block during all hours of the night on a regular basis. It sounded like a mix between a pig dying squeals and nails on a chalkboard. Just another thing no one likes to talk about. Even scarier were the shadows and footsteps. The block was dimly illuminated in the night by a few lights hanging from the ceiling outside the cells. I myself saw shadows fill across my wall on a regular occasion. One time, near the end of my sentence, I woke up, looked at my back wall, and found a perfect silhouette of a person standing there. But when I looked, my bunkmate was asleep, and no one was really outside my call. And the footsteps, everyone hated the fucking footsteps. They were the scariest part. In the night, sometimes, more rarely than the shadows, you would hear ungodly, fast footsteps. They sounded like wet feet slapping on the tile floor. Whatever caused them would fly from one end of the block to the other in a dead sprint. Whatever it wasn't human-like, and it was very fast. If you happened to be awake before it started, by the time you heard the footsteps on one side of your cell and whipped your head around to see the thing run by, it sounded like it was 3 cells past you. Everyone hated those fucking footsteps. And I agree. I thought they were the worst. I was released from that place about a month ago. I have more stories than I can count. I swear it was nearly my turn. About a week before I was discharged, my cellmate and a good friend of mine snapped. In the same kind of way, I didn't sleep for an entire week. Well, I did sleep of course, but never for more than a few minutes at a time. Never turned my back on the guy. The scariest thing though, was when I woke up one night to him, somehow, snaking his body through the bars of our cell. For reference, I couldn't get anything past my shoulder through them. And the worst part of all of this was that he was coming back in to our cell. On the day of my release, I didn't say a word to him. Just left. And he seemed fine with it. And so was I. I had made it through 15 years of prison fights, gang disputes, and for all I know, skinwalker abductions. I left through the front gate, a free man. As I walked along the fence for the rec yard, I spotted my cellmate, standing off on his own, similar to how he was for the last week or so. I shook my head, not even really sure if it was him anymore. I took one last look over the yard, this time from the other side of the fence, and I wish I hadn't. There, standing off on his own, on the other side of the yard, was Carl, slouched over, looking at the other inmates, and twitching manically.